Now, most of the stuff I talked about is from the 1970s or the 1980s. Here is an album from 2003, Frangers by Mew. This album was recommended to me by my dear friend Angel Lozada. At first, I'd never heard of the band, and then I gave it a try. Frangers is probably the best entry point to their output. It really sounds like a pop rock album. But then when you listen to it carefully, there's all these intricacies. There's really this musical complexity that comes through each and every song. Every song is crafted and structured as a pop song, as a radio-friendly song. But the album is much more than that. And I think the band did probably their best work in this album. I mean, they're still active, so they're still putting out great music. Anyway, I must confess I was never a huge fan of the Stooges. I found their music quite brutal, visceral, very direct and straightforward. I thought it was great, but it was not one of my favorite bands. Then I saw an interview with Iggy Pop talking about those early albums, talking about the fact that he was inspired by many contemporary musicians of not classical, but orchestral music, contemporary music at the time, people who were working on contemporary stuff, people who were working on minimalist composers, Dadaist composers, Dada art. So it made me go back and listen to these albums, and then I found Funhouse. Funhouse is really fun, and I really like it. I ended up enjoying it more because I knew this piece of information about, what Iggy Pop was being influenced by. And I really got it when I heard it from that perspective, There's a lot of so-called proto-punk in the album, but it really goes back to the idea of Dada, of brutal art, just straightforward, coming to you, full frontal, with no limits, with no boundaries. And I think that's where the album is most successful, if you look at it from that perspective. Give it a try. Funhouse is, no pun intended, it's really fun. I had a real internal dispute when it came to number 7. I thought about bringing in something from PJ Harvey. Then I thought about bringing in something from Bjork. But really, I think that number 7 spot should go to St. Vincent, which is a band led by Annie Clark, the guitar player. She is amazing. And her album from 2011, Strange Mercy, really deserves a number 7 spot. I mean, this woman, if you've never heard Annie Clark play guitar, certainly she's not, a shredder like Steve Vai or Joe Satriani. She makes something different out of pentatonic scale and blues scale. I've seen several interviews with her, and I'm quite impressed. I mean, I really like her work, and I think it makes for a contemporary, more of, 21st century type of rock music that really deserves to be heard. Now, at number 6 is something that in most people's list of non-progressive rock albums for progressive rockers probably would be higher on the list. It's the Velvet Underground and Nico. This was the Velvet Underground's first album from 1967. That album, it's really ahead of its time. And I really hate to use that term, because I don't think anything is ahead of its time. I think something that it's brilliant because it's brilliant within the context in which it was created. Then again, I think the Velvet Underground really deserves to be thought as something that happened at a time in which we're working within parameters of all that psychedelia that was being produced, and the effect of, experimenting with things like LSD back in the 60s. But then again, the album also have these elements which transcend that regular psychedelia, and they go a little bit more into that canon of experimental music. I really enjoy their most, accessible songs, like Sunday Morning, Femme Fatale. And those are my 2 favorite songs. But then again, Venus in Furs is incredible. And this is really, really an album that I treasure every time I listen to it. It's a unique experience. Probably one of my favorite albums in the whole list. It's probably one of my all-time favorite albums. It really is. So we made it to number 5. Okay, this was quite easy. Sigur Rós, TAC. For those of you who've never heard the Icelandic band Sigur Rós, run. Don't walk, run and listen to these guys. These guys have incredible output throughout the 90s and the 21st century, and it prepares us for some of the stuff that I'm going to list from here on. Sigur Rós is a type of band that it's not easily classified. I mean, you cannot say they're, your average rock band. They sound like post-rock, but they insert some classical music in it. It's some of contemporary orchestrated music in it. If you've never listened to these guys, I think TAC will be a extraordinary way of getting to know these people's music. Again, it works a lot with this the soundscapes, just these landscapes of sound that are fascinating. And actually, there's an interesting fact about Sigur Rós. Most of her albums are sang in Icelandic. It's a true testimony that you don't need to understand the lyrics to really think of the lyrics as, just sound within the music. We're going to see a little bit of that, when we get to other bands from, later on the list.